everyone, and welcome back with the Fatties. I'm Alyssa.
I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Allie.
For all of our visual watchers, we have new paint on the wall behind us today. We're currently undergoing some studio space renovations. So step one was new paint on the walls. So we have a nice bright pink backdrop behind us.
We're getting girlier and girlier.
We're getting girlier and girlier. We're really excited, but just wanted to acknowledge that before we jump in. Today's episode is a continuation of last week's, where we're going to be talking about advocating for yourself in medical spaces. So we're going to kind of jump on into that.
And just in case you thought we were going to be super serious and buttoned up this entire episode and let Alyssa get away with things that are silly, we're not. She did say visual watchers instead of viewers, and I've been hanging on to it for a hot minute.
Alyssa gets no room.
I just love it so much. It's so cute and I love it. And yeah, it doesn't have to be a crazy serious, super hard episode because it's already a crazy, super hard topic. So
yeah.
We're going to laugh our way through it if we can.
Yeah.
And part of that is going to be making fun of you.
Yeah.
But
the goal really, I think, of us talking about this is sharing what we've learned on our journey to advocate for ourselves, things that we will no longer do or allow in medical spaces, and also to help empower you, our listeners, our watchers, to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, because the thing is with advocacy, you can do self-advocacy with a doctor who is nice and kind and you like and want to progress on. In fact, you advocating is going to let them see what you value and what you want your medical care to look like. And unfortunately, we've discussed already, there are times you're going to come across medical professionals who seemingly do not see you fully and or want to treat you in a way that they have preconceived ideas that doesn't work with you and your vision of health, and you'll definitely have to self-advocate in those situations.
So well said. I think a good starting spot with self-advocacy in medical spaces is, what do you do before the appointment? What do you do to set yourself up for a successful appointment with a medical provider?
So we did talk about this in our last health episode, but pretty much the first step to that, I think, is finding a doctor that you feel super comfortable with, but that's also not always going to be the case, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, we have an incredible primary care doctor. We love Dr. Everett, right?
Dr. Everett.
Shout out Dr. Everett. But, you know, we still have, like, I have a urologist, right? Like, there are different doctors.
Specialty doctors.
Specialty doctors. There are, I was just with a friend. I went with a friend a couple weeks ago to an orthopedist, right? So you can't always be like super, super careful about the environment that you're going into. So I do think that there is very much doing the best you can to set yourself up for success. So knowing in advance, if you can, maybe do a little research on the doctors that you are going to go see.
You know, y'all go to Dr. Everett. I don't really have, I have a primary care physician. I've only seen her twice. I don't have, one that I feel at home with yet. And who knows, I might try Dr. Everett at some point. But for me, I will often bounce around to different doctors in the same medical center, for lack of better terms. I don't know the name, just because I don't always know when I'm going to have a cold and I got to go in there pretty quickly, right? So I think whenever I have a situation where I know I'm going to go see a doctor, the main thing for me is to know exactly what I want them to address. You can write that down in your notes app or something, and then making sure those things get talked about, because it very easily can get talked about with something else. For example, I was having trouble with concentration, and something that can affect your concentration is your vitamin levels. But what happened was, that was kind of we need to look at your vitamin levels before we talk about anything else with your concentration. Got the labs, got the results, my vitamin levels were normal. That conversation never came back up and my problem was still there, right? And so I really needed to be okay, we can do that. What in the meantime? What should we schedule ahead of time? And the self-advocacy actually does fall back on me. I need to follow back up, because even though she wanted to see my lab results first, the conversation didn't continue and that didn't prove to show anything, right? So I think really being a dog on a bone, and sometimes I struggle with that. I struggle to do it.
Yeah, so I actually do some more work even before an appointment. I have learned to actually call ahead if I'm seeing a new doctor. I'll call ahead to the office and say, hey, I'm going to be a new patient. I have an appointment tomorrow, later that week. I try and call when it's coming up, and I'd say, I do not want to be weighed when I'm there. So please make a note in my chart for the nurse. And I would also, if I'm calling and like doing research for like a new doctor, hey, does this doctor believe in health at every size? Do they prescribe weight loss? I will ask those questions up front and get in touch with the medical provider before I even schedule an appointment. If their answers are very clearly not in alignment, then that is not an environment for me. Sometimes they're like, hey, like, yes, we do weigh here. Like, yes, we talk about weight, but we totally respect that you don't want this to be a part of your appointment, and that won't be part of the conversation. So I say call ahead, right? Like, I'd rather it be a bad phone call where I can hang up and I'm still in my own space versus a bad appointment when I'm in their space. So asking questions ahead of time before you just make an appointment with someone, I think, is really important. Same thing, like when you're sick, you don't necessarily get to see your primary care doctor.
And sometimes I go to urgent care because I'm working during the day and I realize at 11 p.m. I need to go to urgent care. Yeah,
100%. That for me has been trial and error. Yeah. I have definitely found an urgent care that I love going to. The medical staff is super kind and they always just talk about what I am there for.
I generally find that to be the case for urgent care, and it makes sense, right? Like their goal is not necessarily your long-term health. Their goal is the thing you come there for. So if I'm saying, hey, I am crazy congested and I can't breathe, that's what they're going to do, but urgent care costs more. It's not really supposed to be your regular medical care. And it really is hard when you haven't found like that person. Obviously, once you have a buddy who like has vetted somebody, it can be helpful to jump in on that. Like, I know I've shared a gynecologist before because she treated me and didn't talk about my weight at every session, so those things are helpful. And then I love those people and they tend to leave, right? Like they go and they move and they have their own lives. And it really is something I think that can feel like a lot of work for little payoff, but actually does have a lot of payoff. And
I think it's a lot of payoff.
And even like, okay, so like you getting this relationship with Dr. Everett, right? Yeah. Let's pretend Dr. Everett were to move. I think at that point, having that relationship, you could go to Dr. Everett and be like, I am scared of you moving. Is there someone you believe I should go on to next?
100% that would be the conversation. And already I drive over 45 minutes to see Dr. Everett every 3 months. Hey everyone, did you know that the Fab Fatties are on Patreon? Yes, we are. And you can follow us for more behind the scenes chaos. We have bloopers. We have Allie raging. We have, me climbing out windows. I don't know. We just have a bunch of crazy stuff over there. Yeah. So you can find us on Patreon. That's
PATREON.com/the Fab Fatties.
PATREON. That's what I said.
.com/the Fab Fatties.
And we will see you over there. I make a sacrifice because she takes care of me.
She's worth it.
I leave that office being like, I am taken care of, and truly she has taught me how to advocate for myself.
Yeah.
And she takes some of the burden off of me by advocating for me. So I feel like that's a good place to get started, is always like doing your research, having conversations, asking questions.
Yeah. So I think that brings up a question for me is, we can try and be as prepared as possible, right? But let's say we can't, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say either we're in an emergency room situation or we do have to go to the closest urgent care for whatever reason, right? Or there is only one orthopedist, in the tri-state area, whatever. Like in these circumstances where we can't necessarily get that prepared, let's have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is some preparation. I will say, like, one of the things to step back from before we even think about that is like, what are the red flags to look out for in terms of like, what are they doing that could be harmful that you don't even know necessarily is harmful that you should be looking out for with your providers. So for example, like whenever I go to a place and I do bring up an issue, if they are asking me, if they immediately connect it to weight, that might be it. Especially they only talk about it through a weight perspective. Let's say I have something like my knee is hurting, okay? Most likely a doctor is going to bring up weight in that conversation. There should also be discussions about where it's hurting, how often it's hurting, how am I moving, etc., right? So like I think that's one red flag that I would be looking out for. And I think I shared this story in the last episode, but whenever I'm talking to a doctor and they ask something like, what'd you eat this morning versus what are you eating regularly, what's part of your diet, etc., that to me is also an indication of someone who's really willing to kind of have these like gotcha moments versus wanting to take in more information. And then the last thing I'll say is like someone who recommends something. If it's something that is weight loss oriented or is something that like a lot of fat people get prescribed and you have questions about it, you should ask them what they know about it, because I am often surprised how often doctors will talk to me about stuff they do not know, but they know often affects fat people. And it is shocking to realize that they might be suggesting something they really don't know how it affects you. And that is an indication of, I need to talk to more people than just this one doctor who thinks it's a solution, but knows actually nothing about it.
So what do you do in those situations?
Mm-hmm. Did I put you off into a weird space?
It wasn't you.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. It wasn't you. And then I saw you both looking at me and I said, should I miss something?
No.
It wasn't you. I totally was just having like a moment of like, I'm going to call timeout for a second. I totally had a moment of like the comments online about the diabetes and not wanting to say the wrong thing. I totally spiraled for a second. I'm totally okay. But I missed a little bit of what you said. And then you looked at me like it was my turn to talk and I went, fuck. I'm so sorry.
I think we all got a little, I had that same kind of moment when you were talking about health at every size. Literally in my head, I'm like, a troll's going to be like, so you're just going to find a doctor that tells you that you're healthy. Like, I think it's natural for that shit to kind of come up.
Yeah.
And then, I'm like following along with what you're saying. And like, all I can think about is like rage. Right.
I'm so sorry.
And so I'm like, no. But like, these are natural reactions and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because we're conditioned to have these reactions. Like we it's not that we've been conditioned. It's that our brains and our bodies literally, they take the data that we have. Mm-hmm. And the data that we have is we have been treated poorly at doctors and we've been treated poorly on the internet.
Well, and that's why I think the red flags are important, because a doctor saying to me, what'd you have for breakfast, is not outwardly aggressive.
Yeah.
It's not. But what it is, it's an indication of only wanting a small bit of information to then have a reason to say the next thing, right? And it's someone that's not really looking at your health comprehensively.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of times we are preparing ourselves for the worst, but what we get is very microaggressive things. And I know people have different conversations about microaggression right now. I'm thinking about it constantly. but that is what microaggression means.
The literal definition.
Yes. And so those are things to look out for, because it's an indication that your healthcare provider is not...
doesn't respect
when
you.
Same thing. I've talked about this before, when they're like, oh, you gotta eat healthy and you gotta exercise, but they've never asked me what I eat and what movements in my life. That's a red flag. Did we have a full conversation? Did I do a tracking of my meals so you could see what I'm eating and tracking my exercise? No, you're just making that up based off of how I look.
Yeah.
That is a red flag. And that is literally how we get disordered eating and eating disorders. Like, that's
I think
dangerous.
Any doctor who their first instinct is to prescribe weight loss. It's like, my head hurts, lose weight. My knee hurts, lose weight. My nose is running, lose weight. Like, it sounds like we're exaggerating, but we're not.
No.
Like, that has been overwhelmingly our experience.
Well, and like even a pharmacist, okay? A pharmacist giving you medication. We now know like a lot of people are doing things like semaglutides, all that stuff, right? A pharmacist told someone I know, like, only eat 26 grams of carbs while you're on this. That's to lose a lot of weight. That's not actually good maintaining of health, you know? And so, like, why are you the pharmacist giving nutrition advice to someone who's taking a medication that's going to affect their nutrition?
It's dangerous.
It is dangerous. And those are the things that people say because they're like, oh, this person just wants to lose a lot of weight. One way to do it is to really limit the carbs. Well, without, again, true knowledge, education, and thinking of the bigger picture.
Yeah. And truly, that's why we feel so passionate. Like, we're not giving you medical advice.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to tell you how to take care of yourself medically, because you are your own person and you need to take care of yourself how you see fit. What we want to do is give you the tools and resources. You know, going way back to your question about, like, what do you do when you show up to the appointment, right? The first thing, do not get on the scale. I don't care if you are fat, if you are mid-size, if you are super fat, if you are super skinny. I don't care. Don't get on the scale. It is the most empowering thing ever. Don't do it. They're going to walk you back. They're going to say, hey, here's the scale. And you're going to say, no, thank you. I promise you, I've only had 2 negative experiences out of the 3-4 years now that I have not gone on the scale.
This is strictly because I'm thinking of the internet right now, and I think the only thought I have about that is don't get on the scale if you don't want to. There are people, I think, I'm thinking of like a very select, I don't know, number of illnesses or whatever that may truly need to gain weight, right?
Well,
you know, or whatever.
So specifically, I am working on like some documentation to put up at the YMCA around the scale in the locker room. And the only true reason we have to get on the scale that is not around tracking our weight is there are some conditions like heart failure that you need to weigh yourself daily to track if your lungs are is it lungs? It's like a fluid buildup. Again, not a doctor.
So.
Not a doctor,
right.
But that's a reason where you get on the scale. I know my grandmother needs to get on the scale every single day, because if all of a sudden there's like a 5 number difference overnight, that's indicating that actually something's wrong and she needs to go to the hospital. So yes, in those cases, get on the scale. But if your only reason to get on the scale is to know your number, don't do it. It really does set a tone for the appointment.
I totally get what you're saying. Because it is still, I think it's something that people don't know, that they truly can just say, no, thank you.
Yep.
Right? People don't really know that. Again, if you don't want to see that number, and no, we don't believe that there is anything empowering about seeing that number, other than what society and diet culture has taught you about seeing that number. So I think a lot of people don't know that you can walk in and say, oh, no, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to see my number.
Or if you have to, right? Let's just say you're going to have surgery and they need to know how much you weigh for anesthesia and things like that. Get on backwards.
Or you're establishing care with a new doctor.
Yeah, don't allow them to say the number out loud. Ask them to not put the number in your chart. Don't give yourself access to it. It really is super empowering.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys know what my solution is to gearing up or being prepared for kind of any situation when you go to the doctor. Just bring a buddy. And I know that's not always, an option for everybody. But as best you can, if you're planning to see a new doctor, or, even if it's an emergency room situation, bring somebody that loves you, bring somebody who cares about you, and bring somebody who doesn't love you, quotation marks, in a way that they're like, oh, I love you, so I care about your weight. That's not what I mean, but bring somebody who really cares and who knows kind of where your threshold is, I guess. And I'm just going to say, is a fucking bulldog, because I know, I feel like you, Alyssa, will pretty much kind of say what's on your mind. Rebecca,
I do
feel like you do as well. But I have had situations with friends where I've gone to the doctor with them, and they kind of either, like, I can tell that they're very upset by what this doctor is prescribing. Like, I went to an orthopedist with a friend of mine, and she was having trouble with her knee, and she had been having trouble with her knee, and she kept asking for support with having trouble with her knee. And it was like, this guy just looked at her, and all he saw was weight loss. And like, she's like, okay, I need help today. And he's just like, well, you could lose weight. And I looked at this man, I was like, excuse me, sir, in a respectful way. But then it just kept getting worse, where he then was like, well, we can't do surgery. So Lucky decided that was his cue to leave. We usually have Lucky in his little bed somewhere here in the studio for a majority of like the first part of the episode here, but he decided that was his time to leave. So we are recollecting our thoughts here. But anyway, I'm a bulldog. I go to the doctor with my friends, and we were discussing this one particular situation where this doctor just did not want to hear, hey, I need some help today. All he wanted to say was, you are too fat for me to help you. Because that's what it basically came down to. And the really cruel thing to me is that I have heard several doctors now at this point, when someone is going in for something that, potentially a surgery could really help them, be beneficial to them, maybe a knee surgery or a back surgery or something that would improve their life, right? The doctor's like, well, I can't do that. I can't do that because of your quote unquote BMI. But you know what I can do? Weight loss surgery. Why? Why? Well, anesthesia. Okay, so you can put me under for weight loss surgery, but you can't put me under for a knee surgery. Make it make sense. And also, why is an orthopedist, just like you said, why is an orthopedist prescribing weight loss surgery? How is that your fucking wheelhouse, bro?
I think in general, like a lot of these hospitals do have rules around BMI. And at the very same time, a doctor will say BMI is antiquated, and it's not. And I'm like, where, when? And I do think this is where, on a much bigger scale, you should be looking at things like NAFA and such for what kind of advocacy is happening for fat people in medical industry, et cetera. Like, we need doctors to advocate for us, to boards, et cetera, to do this, right? But I also think I have an easy, like you mentioned, you're not sure if I would like stay up for myself, right? I think what allows me to really stick up for myself in a doctor's office, even if their words do affect me and I get upset by them, is the fact that I work in higher education. And every once in a while, I recognize that my privilege from being in an education setting is coming into play. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times doctors will use all of their title, all of their power of education, etc., to talk down to you, to minimize, to not take you seriously. And it does happen. Like, it happens often. And when I show up and I can articulate what's going on, and I can articulate what they're not doing, it usually surprises them. And I think that so many people have been taught to respect doctors and to just go in and listen and take their advice without question. I certainly was taught that as a kid. That people struggle to remember that they are fully fledged adults. They're paying the doctor, their insurance is paying the doctor, and damn it, you better get your care you need. And sometimes that does mean, unfortunately, continuing and going to more places, which is not always financially accessible to people. It's not always time and travel accessible to people, and that's really frustrating. And the thing to know there is, like, there are things you can do. There are things you can do instead of saying, please put it down in my notes that you have denied me these services or these options.
Let's talk about that.
I love that.
You can also make complaints. I one time had a doctor where I had a really bad experience with them, and to them I had to pull can you put it in my notes that you're declining this, and can you also consult with the highest level doctor on your team about this? And they did end up coming back on to my side of what I was advocating for myself. But I was so upset with the way I was talked to, that when I left, I've gone to this doctor's office since I was a child. One of the people who checks you out was like, is something wrong? And I was like, this is my first time seeing this doctor, and it's the first time I've ever felt belittled, and like, I don't know my body more than they know me from the first time they've ever met me. And you can make a formal complaint. Not to say that that's going to affect their job. I'm sure they get complaints that are are both something they need to take on and something they don't need to take on, right? But it does need to be formalized, because if they continuously are showing bias towards larger patients and it builds up over time, it could be powerful. But also it could be reason enough for you to be shown a different doctor. It could be reason enough that they have to have another doctor that they consult with on your cases, whatever that may be. And I think as a culture, like, we do struggle, like, you know, the Karen, right? We don't want to be a Karen. We don't want to, like, complain about things.
Or Jennifer.
It is something worth being the squeaky wheel, being the Karen about. It's your health. And if they are treating you poorly, or they're not willing to treat you at all, you should be able to demand a better care. Some hospitals have advocacy people that work specifically for patient advocacy. And it is hard. It is hard because those people also work for the hospital, right? And the hospital has their own reputation they want to uphold and all that stuff, right? At the same time, get it on file. And that there's so many places like that. Like higher education is one of those places. Like if it's not on file, it often doesn't get the attention it needs.
I think one of the things is too that you know, we can't ignore is that so many times it's not just that, you know, oh, well, the hospital has standards on BMI. It's insurance. It's insurance too.
Yes.
And I mean, I think we all collectively know how we all feel about insurance right now. But it's 100% insurance, not 100%, but it is, insurance is a huge problem. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, if I had cash and said, I want this surgery, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, will that be cash or charge? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like your BMI doesn't matter then. And that's the thing. That's the thing that pisses me off. I mean, all of this pisses me off, but like that is really one of the things. It's like it all does boil down to capitalism. I know I sound like one of those tin hat people right now, but like
no, for real. I mean, like, listen, I had weight loss surgery, right? So like in some ways, I did see my doctors treat me better once they saw me as compliant. Okay, like I noticed a difference with the weight loss surgery. My insurance required XYZ, but if I were to do it outside of insurance, he said I could have had the surgery in a month. Imagine going from like thinking you might want the surgery to having it in a month's time, because he's getting paid. He's fine. His wall of things you need to do to show this is going to be okay with you is much shorter than the insurance wall.
I mean, we can literally just look at Ozempic, right? It's like celebrities don't have better insurance than we do. They have cash.
Yes.
Like, sorry. It's just like, it's not that all of a sudden, like all the celebrities got prescribed Ozempic or a GLP-1, right? They just have the money to not use, to go through insurance. And that's the really disgusting thing. It's like, if you have the money to fit societal standards, we have more respect for you and we'll do whatever the fuck you want. That is just, I mean, that's how everything works these days, right? So God, Monday is coming.
I will say, like, Alyssa mentioned Health at Every Size. There is a website for Health at Every Size. They do have like a list of providers. I don't know if there's any other websites.
Health at Every Size is the main one, and it is a fantastic resource. There is so much that you can find online. We were talking before about saying no thank you to getting weighed, but they actually have these little cards that you can print out and just hand to the nurse when they bring you back, that you don't even have to say anything. And it will just say like, hey, please don't weigh me. Or there's options of like, hey, I'm going to get on the scale backwards. Please do not share my weight number with me at all in any form. Cannot be in my papers. It can't be anywhere I have access to it. And they're just these little printable cards. Sometimes that's easier. Like I said, calling ahead sometimes is really great. But yeah, Health at Every Size, there's so many resources on there. It just makes it's really user friendly. And it's very watered down content that is like, what's the word I'm looking for? Tangible. Yeah. It's very tangible, the resources that they provide on their website. So I highly recommend checking them out. Yes, they have providers, but they also have like things about type 2 diabetes and A1C, and it just so many amazing resources.
Yeah. And I do think it's, again, kind of like that once you find one in, like a Dr. Everett, it can provide more ins, right?
Yes.
And more things you kind of know of what you want to do. So to wrap us up, all of these little moments, we can prepare for them in the doctor's office, but we don't know when they're going to come into play, right? And we don't know who we're going to encounter in our health journeys. And so what it does kind of pull to me is like a long-term need to build confidence in yourself for self-advocacy. And so how do we kind of move towards these practices are going to be good for us longer than just a moment. These are things that are good for us in general.
What's going on?
Yeah.
I just keep thinking about my dad. I just had a really hard time. Nobody treated him with kindness. And now it's just so much easier for me to understand now. Even when he was borderline dying, it literally took an act of me, forcing him to go to the emergency room because he just would not go.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the reason we do have to learn to be advocates, right? Because if we know it's a place that is both needed for us and dangerous to us.
Harmful.
Yeah. How do we get ourselves to go somewhere when we know it's so harmful, right? And all we can really do is prepare to protect ourselves. And we still might get the shit end of the stick.
100%.
Yeah.
None of this is fail-proof.
No.
None of it. It's all just about trying. Because regardless of your size, you deserve healthcare.
It's making room for your respect of yourself. It's making room for respect of yourself, right? And yeah.
Do you want to step out?
Yeah, if you want to step out, we can just finish up without you.
We can wrap it up. Go snuggle with Lucky.
So we're gonna finish up without Allie, because she needed a break.
Yeah.
And I don't know if what we discussed will show up, but it makes it hard because, again, no matter how much we prepare ourselves to go in and best advocate for ourselves, we still might get medical bias. We still might get treated very poorly, as if we have no care or concern for ourselves, as if we have brought all of our health issues onto ourselves. It's a very common theme that gets thrown in fat people's faces, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes it tough. I think we both want to have the skills to do this and recognize the sadness that a lot of people don't, and we could still get really shitty healthcare.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
This is not easy work.
Yeah.
This is hard. This is hard work, and it is emotional when people who are put in positions of power say hurtful things towards you that are untrue, right?
And I think, you've really honed in on this part with me, right? We know fat people, the reason we can prepare for these visits before we go is we know what people are going to say about us. Sometimes it's become the internal voice inside our own heads.
Yes.
Right? So we know what people are saying and thinking, and we can sometimes go on to believe it. And then it really is important to step back and say, is this true? So, for example, whenever I had the doctor who said, what'd you eat this morning? And I said, a bagel. And he's like, you need to stop. I'm like, how often do I eat a bagel? How often is that what my morning breakfast is? I'm not going to let someone tell me anymore what my reality is.
Exactly.
And I think we have to balance those feelings and fears and guilt that often come with having a body outside the norm with what's actually real, right? And reminding yourself of that. One of the things that I think is just best in terms of doing this long term is building confidence that you are allowed to do these things. And I do think you need to know you're not going to be the only one who's going to advocate to not get weighed or to have to say, can we not talk about my weight? This is a common thing, and more people are having to do it, and especially women are having to do it.
Yes.
And so I don't think you should feel any shame or you're being super subversive by doing it. You're not the only one. And if you are the first time a doctor has ever said that, or if someone, sorry, I got a hair in front of my face, y'all. If someone's wanting to say you're the only one that wants to not be weighed, then be the only one.
Yeah.
Be the only one.
Yes.
And when you leave, be like, damn, I started something, right? Damn, I blew their minds, and let them think on it for the rest of the day. Really take pride in yourself for deciding what's going to work for you versus feeling bad for asking for it.
Yes, absolutely. I cannot tell you what self-advocacy has done for me as a person. I've learned so much about myself and my self-worth by learning how to advocate for myself in environments where I don't feel welcomed, you know? And I think it really comes down to, at the end of the day, I feel the most comfortable with we statements. And this is how I've begun to do the work for myself. I believe that everyone, regardless of their size, should have accessible health care. I want everyone who goes to the doctor's office to get the treatment that they need. And I am part of that.
And I want everyone to go into a doctor's office and be talked to with compassion and respect.
Empathy, compassion, kindness, respect.
And to be shown that there are a myriad of options, not just one pathway in health.
Yes.
So
very well said, Rebecca.
We
Absolutely.
wish you well in your advocacy journey with your health. It's tough work. It is essential work. And I think the more we do it, it just sets us up to better advocate as we get older and continue to face health issues, because we all do.
And you're not alone.
Yeah.
Right? We all do. You are not alone. I think you'll be surprised if you Google what you'll be able to find people talking about.
Yeah, and if you're not sure of an interaction you had with a doctor and what that means, there are people to talk about it with. You know, I mean, feel free to drop into our DMs, but I think also, like, I find people on Reddit talking about interactions with their doctors. There might be people on NAFA's site, National Association for Fat Acceptance, or something like that. Sorry if I messed it up. But, like, there are places to talk about it and to get insight. And, you know, I think sometimes we're like, are we overreacting? Are we whatever? You're allowed to, like, look into that. You don't have to just dismiss your own response to the way a doctor has talked to you or treated you.
Yeah.
So be curious, hold your own.
And advocate.
And we will see you next time.
Yeah.
We're fat.
We're fab.
We're friends that need a break sometimes.
We are still friends. Friends who are crying outside.
Hot girls cry. Allie is proof.
Period.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.